Subscribe to Cheating Tales Lab. Now let's begin. The rain hammered against Matthew Barber's windshield as he drove through the affluent neighborhood of Riverside Heights at 2 in the morning. The call had come 20 minutes ago, a neighbor he'd never met, voice tight with concern. "There's a child outside the Williamson estate. In a box. I think it might be yours." His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. His daughter, Emma, 6 years old. She was supposed to be staying with her grandmother while Matthew worked a double shift at the hospital. He was a cardiac surgeon, one of the best in the state, but right now his own heart felt like it might give out. He screeched to a halt outside the iron gates of the Williamson mansion, a sprawling Mediterranean-style estate that had been in his late wife's family for 3 generations. The gates were locked, but he could see it from the street, a large cardboard box on the circular driveway, 20 feet from the front door. Matthew vaulted the fence, his 6-foot frame clearing it easily despite the exhaustion weighing him down. He'd been on his feet for 16 hours straight, performing emergency surgeries, saving lives. And while he'd been saving strangers, his daughter had been. He reached the box, and his breath caught. Emma was curled inside, wearing thin pajamas, her blonde hair matted with rain. She was shivering, conscious but glassy-eyed. He scooped her into his arms, and she buried her face in his chest. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I've got you, sweetheart. I've got you." The front door opened, flooding the driveway with warm light. Blanca Williamson stood in the doorway, her silver hair immaculate despite the late hour, wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. At 62, she carried herself with the imperious bearing of someone who'd never heard the word no. "Finally," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Your mongrel was making such a racket." Matthew's jaw clenched. "You put her outside? In a storm?" Blanca's lips curved into a smirk. She refused to eat her dinner properly. Used her hands like an animal. "I told her civilized people don't behave that way, and if she wanted to act like a stray dog, she could sleep with them." Something cold and sharp crystallized in Matthew's chest. This wasn't the first incident. There had been others over the past year since his wife Claire's death. Emma coming home with bruises Blanca dismissed as clumsiness, meals withheld for minor infractions, cruel comments about how Emma would never live up to the Williamson name. He'd tried to be understanding. Grief manifested in different ways, and Blanca had lost her only daughter. But this crossed every line. "She's 6 years old," Matthew said quietly, his voice vibrating with controlled fury. "And she needs discipline. Claire was too soft on her, just like she was too soft choosing you." Blanca's eyes raked over him with contempt. A surgeon? How middle class? Claire could have married Trevor Caldwell. Old money, proper breeding. Instead, she threw herself away on some scholarship boy who performs manual labor for a living. Matthew carried Emma toward his car, her small body still trembling. He paused at the gate and looked back at Blanca, who stood framed in her doorway like a portrait of aristocratic cruelty. "Remember this moment," he whispered to Emma, loud enough for Blanca to hear. "Remember what she did, and remember what comes next." Blanca laughed, the sound carrying across the rain-soaked driveway. "Is that a threat? I'm shaking in my Louboutins. You have no power here, Matthew. You never did." As he drove away, Emma's small hand found his. "Daddy, why does Grandma Blanca hate us?" Matthew's throat tightened. "Some people are taught that cruelty is strength, sweetheart. They're wrong. Will we ever go back there?" "Yes," Matthew said, and the certainty in his voice surprised even him. "But not the way she expects." 8 years earlier, Matthew had met Claire Williamson at Boston General Hospital. She'd been a volunteer in the pediatric ward, reading to sick children despite her family's objections that charity work was performative and beneath them. She was beautiful, dark hair, bright eyes, a laugh that could light up a room, but it was her kindness that had captured him. Their courtship had been a war. Blanca had opposed it from the first moment, viewing Matthew as nothing more than a gold digger despite his prestigious position. The fact that he'd grown up in foster care, that he'd put himself through medical school on scholarships and night jobs, only confirmed her prejudices. "You're marrying down," Blanca had told Claire at their engagement party, loud enough for Matthew to hear. "He'll drain you dry and leave you with nothing." But Claire had stood firm. They'd married in a small ceremony, and for 5 beautiful years, they'd built a life together. Emma had been born, perfect and precious. Matthew's career had flourished. They'd bought a modest house in a good neighborhood, nothing like the Williamson estate, but filled with love. Then came the drunk driver on a rainy Tuesday evening. Claire had been on her way home from a gallery opening. The other driver walked away without a scratch. Claire died before the ambulance arrived. Matthew had fallen apart. For 6 months, he'd barely functioned, going through the motions at work while grief consumed him. Emma, only 5 at the time, had needed him, but he'd been drowning. Blanca had swooped in, offering to help with Emma. At first, Matthew had been grateful. She was Claire's mother, Emma's grandmother. Surely she loved the child. He'd been catastrophically wrong. The day after the cardboard box incident, Matthew called in sick for the first time in his career. He took Emma to the pediatrician, who documented the hypothermia, the bruises, the signs of neglect. He contacted a family lawyer, a stern woman named Patricia Spaulding, who listened to his story with mounting outrage. You could press charges, Patricia said. Child endangerment, possible abuse. Would it stick? Patricia's hesitation told him everything. The Williamsons have deep pockets and deeper connections. Blanca would hire the best defense attorneys money can buy. They'd paint you as a vengeful son-in-law, claim Emma was just playing outside and you're exaggerating. With her social standing. So she gets away with it. In the short term? Probably. But Matthew, document everything. Every incident, every witness. Build a file. The law moves slowly, but it does move. Matthew left her office with a hollow feeling in his chest. The system wouldn't protect his daughter. It was built for people like Blanca, wealthy, connected, untouchable. He'd have to protect Emma himself. That night, after putting Emma to bed and checking on her 3 times to make sure she was warm and safe, Matthew sat in his study and did something he hadn't done since medical school. He made a plan. Blanca Williamson thought he had no power. She was wrong. He started with research. The Williamson family wealth, it turned out, wasn't as solid as it appeared. Blanca's husband, Richard Williamson, had died 15 years ago, leaving her the estate and a substantial trust. But trusts had conditions, and Blanca had expensive tastes. The mansion alone cost a fortune to maintain: property taxes, staff, upkeep. Matthew discovered something else. Blanca's social circle was built on perception. She hosted charity galas, sat on museum boards, sponsored art exhibitions, all activities that required significant capital. Her power came from being seen as wealthy, connected, untouchable. What if that perception was wrong? He began to dig deeper, calling in favors from colleagues who had connections in finance and real estate. One of them, Dr. Kevin Franklin, an old friend from medical school who'd left medicine to become a real estate developer, met him for coffee. The Williamson estate, Kevin said, stirring his espresso. That's prime real estate. Riverside Heights is one of the hottest markets in the state. Why the interest? Matthew told him a carefully edited version of the story. Kevin's expression darkened. I'm sorry, man. That's brutal. He paused. You want to know if she's vulnerable financially? Is she? Kevin pulled out his phone, scrolling through databases. The property is worth approximately $8 million. But here's the thing. She took out a mortgage against it 6 years ago, $2.5 million. And another loan 3 years ago, $1.2 million. She's been borrowing against the equity. Why? Lifestyle, charitable donations, tax deductible, but they still require cash. From what I can see, her liquid assets are limited. The trust pays out quarterly, but it's not as much as you'd think. Old money isn't always smart money. Matthew leaned forward. What if she missed payments? On that kind of property, the bank would be patient for a while, but eventually. Kevin met his eyes. Eventually they'd foreclose. Matt, what are you thinking? I'm thinking, Matthew said slowly, that sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's structural. Over the next 2 years, Matthew executed his plan with surgical precision. He worked brutal hours, taking every overtime shift, every consulting opportunity. He invested carefully, aggressively. His reputation as a cardiac surgeon was impeccable, and he used it, building relationships with wealthy patients who became investors in his portfolio. He also became a different kind of father to Emma. Where Claire had been warm and nurturing, Matthew taught his daughter to be strong. They went to martial arts classes together. He taught her chess, strategy, critical thinking. He never spoke directly about what Blanca had done, but Emma understood on some instinctive level that they were preparing for something. Why do I need to learn all this? Emma asked one evening when she was 7, frustrated after a difficult chess puzzle. Because knowledge is power, Matthew said, and nobody can take it away from you. Not ever. He also hired a private investigator, a gruff former cop named Stuart Barton, who specialized in financial forensics. Stuart's job was simple: track every dollar Blanca Williamson spent. The picture that emerged was damning. Blanca was hemorrhaging money. The mortgage payments were becoming irregular. She'd taken out loans from private lenders, using her social connections to secure favorable terms that wouldn't show up on public records. She was liquidating assets, jewelry, art, heirlooms, quietly, through private sales. She's drowning, Stuart reported, trying to maintain appearances while everything crumbles. Give her another year, maybe 2, and she'll be bankrupt. Can we accelerate that timeline? Matthew asked. Stuart raised an eyebrow. How aggressive do you want to be? Very. The first move was subtle. Matthew, through a shell corporation he'd established with Kevin's help, began buying up Blanca's debts. The private lenders were happy to sell. They were getting nervous about her ability to repay. Matthew paid pennies on the dollar for loans that Blanca thought were safe, buried in handshake agreements with old friends. The second move was more personal. Blanca's social power came from her charitable work and her position on various boards. Matthew began attending the same charity events, making substantial donations in his late wife's name. He was charming, professional, and generous. He shared stories about Claire, about her kindness, her genuine love for helping others. Claire always said charity should come from the heart, not the checkbook, he told the director of the Children's Hospital Foundation at a gala. Blanca was standing 10 feet away, holding court with her usual crowd. She'd be heartbroken to see causes she loved being used for social climbing. The comment landed. Whispers started. People began to look at Blanca's charitable work differently. Was it genuine or performative? Matthew's donations, meanwhile, were substantial and consistent. Within a year, he was invited to join the hospital foundation board. Blanca's influence began to wane. The third move was the most dangerous. Matthew reached out to Trevor Caldwell, the man Blanca had wanted Claire to marry. Trevor was now a divorced hedge fund manager with a drinking problem and a reputation for bad investments. They met at an exclusive club where Trevor was still a member, though barely. The man was bloated, bitter, nursing a scotch at 3 in the afternoon. I heard about Claire, Trevor said. I'm sorry. She was special. She was, Matthew agreed. She also left behind a daughter who deserves better than what she's getting. Trevor frowned. What do you mean? Matthew told him about the cardboard box. About Blanca's cruelty. Trevor's expression shifted from confusion to recognition. That's Blanca, he said quietly. She's always been like that. Vicious. Claire used to protect me from her when we were dating. I wasn't good enough, either, despite my family's money. When Claire chose you, Blanca wrote her off as a disappointment. She's not as wealthy as she pretends, is she? Trevor laughed bitterly. The Williamsons? They're one bad quarter away from ruin. Have been for years. Richard was a terrible investor, and Blanca's worse. She just hides it better. What if I told you I could make her pay for what she did? Trevor studied him. What do you need? Information. Access. You're still in her social circle, barely. You hear things. And what do I get? Matthew smiled coldly. The satisfaction of watching her fall. And I'll buy that outstanding loan you took from her 3 years ago. The one she's been using to keep you quiet about her financial problems. Trevor's eyes widened. How did you? I do my research. Yes or no? Trevor raised his glass. To Claire. And to making her mother regret every cruel word. By the time Emma turned 8, Matthew's plan was nearing completion. He'd acquired controlling interest in Blanca's debts. He'd systematically undermined her social standing. He'd documented every missed payment, every loan, every desperate attempt to stay afloat. The Williamson estate's mortgage was in default. The bank had been sending notices for 6 months. Blanca had been stalling, using her connections to buy time, but time was running out. Matthew owned the debt. Through shell companies and intermediaries, he'd purchased it from the bank at a discount. The bank was happy to offload a problem asset. Blanca had no idea. On a cold Tuesday in November, Matthew pulled his car up to Emma's school and waited. She came out wearing her backpack, talking animatedly with friends. At 8, she was confident, strong, nothing like the shivering child he'd found in that cardboard box. She climbed into the car and noticed the manila envelope on the passenger seat. What's that? She asked. Justice, Matthew said. Are you ready? Emma had known this day was coming. They'd talked about it in careful, age-appropriate terms. She knew her grandmother had been cruel. She knew her father had been working to make things right. I'm ready, she said. They drove to Riverside Heights. The Williamson estate looked the same, imposing, pristine, utterly untouchable. But Matthew knew better. The paint was chipping in places. The grounds weren't as well maintained. The staff had been reduced. The cracks were showing. They walked up to the front door. Matthew rang the bell. Blanca answered, her face registering shock, then fury. What are you doing here? I have a restraining order. No, you don't, Matthew said calmly. You threatened to get one, but you never filed. Probably because you couldn't afford the legal fees. Blanca's face flushed. Get off my property. Actually, Matthew said, it's not your property. Not anymore. He handed Emma the manila envelope. She took it solemnly and held it out to her grandmother. What is this? Blanca demanded. Open it, Emma said, her voice steady. Blanca snatched the envelope and tore it open. Inside was a formal eviction notice. She read it once, twice, her face going pale. This is a mistake, she said. The bank doesn't own your debt anymore, Matthew said. I do. Every loan, every mortgage, every penny you borrowed to maintain this facade. I bought it all. And now I'm calling it due. Blanca's hands shook. This is illegal. I'll sue you for what? Collecting on legally acquired debts? I've done everything by the book, Blanca. My lawyers have checked every detail. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. You can't do this. Blanca's composure finally cracked. This house has been in my family for 3 generations. And you lost it, Matthew said quietly. You lost it through greed and cruelty and the mistaken belief that you were untouchable. Blanca's eyes found Emma. This is your doing, you little. Careful, Matthew said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Choose your next words very carefully. Blanca's mouth opened and closed. For the first time in her life, she had no cutting remark, no dismissive gesture. She looked at the eviction notice again, as if hoping the words would change. Remember this moment, Emma said softly, echoing her father's words from 8 years ago. Remember what you did to me, and remember what it cost you. They turned and walked away, leaving Blanca standing in her doorway, the eviction notice trembling in her hands. As they drove off, Emma was quiet. Matthew glanced at her. How do you feel? I thought I'd feel happy, she said. But I just feel sad. For her. Matthew pulled over and looked at his daughter. That's because you're a good person, Emma. Better than she ever was. But don't mistake sadness for weakness. What we did was necessary. I know, Emma said. She needed to learn that actions have consequences. Exactly. They drove home, and for the first time in 8 years, Matthew felt like he could breathe. But Blanca Williamson wasn't finished. She'd built her life on manipulation and connections, and she unleashed everything she had left. She called in favors, contacted old friends, spread rumors. Within a week, Matthew started receiving calls from hospital administration. Complaints had been filed, anonymous, but numerous. Questions about his professional conduct, his ethics, whether he was fit to practice medicine. This is harassment, Matthew told the hospital's chief of staff, Dr. Gilbert Boyd, a man he'd worked with for a decade. I know, Gilbert said wearily, and I'm doing what I can to shut it down. But Matthew, some of these complaints are coming from major donors. People with influence. What's going on? Matthew explained the situation. Gilbert's expression hardened. Blanca Williamson did that to your daughter? He was a grandfather himself, and the thought of a child left outside in a storm clearly shook him. My God, she's trying to destroy my career because I foreclosed on her mansion. Can she? Not if I have anything to say about it, Matthew said. But I need your support. You have it, Gilbert said immediately. Document everything. Every complaint, every call. If she wants to play dirty, we'll bury her in paperwork. But Blanca wasn't just targeting Matthew's career. She went after his character. She spread rumors through her social circle. He was an abusive father, a gold digger who'd married Claire for money, a vindictive man using his daughter to settle scores. Some people believed her. Others, who'd watched Matthew's charitable work and dedication over the years, didn't. The community divided. One evening, Matthew came home to find his house vandalized. Someone had spray-painted child abuser across his garage door. Emma saw it before he could cover it up. Is that what people think? She asked, her voice small. Some people, Matthew admitted. Your grandmother is spreading lies. Why doesn't anyone stop her? Because lies are easy, and the truth is complicated. But Emma, the truth always wins eventually. You have to trust that. The police investigated, but found no leads. Matthew had the garage repainted, installed security cameras, and continued forward. Then Blanca made her biggest mistake. She approached Emma's school, claiming that Matthew was unfit and that she should have custody. She arrived with her lawyer, a slick man named Devin Caldwell, Trevor's cousin, ironically enough, though they'd long since had a falling out, and demanded a meeting with the principal. The principal, a sharp-eyed woman named Carolyn O'Connor, listened to Blanca's accusations. Then she pulled Emma's file, which included the pediatrician's report from 8 years ago, documenting the hypothermia and neglect. Mrs. Williamson, Carolyn said carefully, I'm going to ask you to leave. If you attempt to contact this child again without proper legal authority, I will call the police. Blanca's face turned purple. You can't. I can. And I will. Emma Barber is a happy, healthy, well-adjusted child with an excellent academic record and strong friendships. Dr. Barber is an exemplary parent. You, on the other hand, have a documented history of child endangerment. Now get out of my school. Devin Caldwell tried to argue, but Carolyn cut him off. If you're not off school property in the next 60 seconds, I'm calling security and filing a restraining order. They left, but Carolyn called Matthew immediately to inform him of what happened. Thank you, Matthew said, for protecting her. That's my job, Carolyn said. But Dr. Barber, this woman is dangerous. She's desperate, and desperate people do terrible things. Watch your back. She was right. The 30-day eviction period was nearly up. Blanca had filed multiple appeals, all of which had been denied. The legal system, for once, was working exactly as it should. Matthew's documentation was airtight, his acquisition of the debts completely legal. Blanca was going to lose her mansion. 3 days before the eviction date, Matthew received a call from Stuart Barton, his investigator. We have a problem, Stuart said. Blanca hired someone. A fixer. Guy named Longlass. He's got a reputation for making problems disappear. What kind of problems? The kind that involve people getting hurt. Matt, this guy's dangerous. He works in legal gray areas. Intimidation, blackmail, occasionally worse. You need to be careful. Matthew felt a chill. Is Emma safe? I've already arranged for security at her school. But you both need to watch out. Glass doesn't play by normal rules. That night, Matthew sat Emma down and had a hard conversation. He explained that her grandmother was trying to hurt them, that they needed to be extra careful. Emma listened solemnly. I'm not scared, she said. We're stronger than her. We are, Matthew agreed. But strength means being smart, not reckless. So we follow the rules. We stay alert. And we finish this. 2 days before the eviction, Longlass made his move. Matthew was leaving the hospital late at night when a black SUV pulled up beside him in the parking garage. The window rolled down, revealing a man in his 40s with dead eyes and a practiced smile. Dr. Barber, Lon said. We should talk. I don't think so. Mrs. Williamson has made you a generous offer. She's willing to pay you twice what you paid for her debts, plus interest. All she asks is that you cancel the eviction and give her time to get back on her feet. Not interested. Lon's smile didn't waver. That's unfortunate. Because Mrs. Williamson also wanted me to remind you that accidents happen. To anyone. Even to little girls. Matthew's blood ran cold. He stepped closer to the SUV, his voice dropping to something barely audible. If you or anyone working for you goes near my daughter, I will destroy you. Not legally. Not professionally. I will end you. Do you understand? Lon laughed. Big words from a doctor. But you're not a violent man, are you? You play by the rules. That's your weakness. You're wrong, Matthew said. I play to win. And right now, you're in my way. He walked away, heart pounding, and immediately called Stuart. Glass just threatened Emma. Where are you? Hospital parking garage. He's in a black SUV. Matthew read off the license plate. I'm on it. Matt, go home. Make sure Emma's safe. I'll handle this. Matthew drove home, checking his rearview mirror constantly. Emma was with a babysitter, a retired police officer named Kathleen Arroyo that Stuart had recommended. When he arrived, Kathleen met him at the door. Everything okay here? He asked. Quiet night, Kathleen said. Emma's asleep. But you look like you've seen a ghost. Matthew filled her in. Kathleen's expression hardened. I know Longglass. He's scum. But he's also a coward. He goes after soft targets. If he knows we're ready for him, he'll back off. And if he doesn't, then he'll learn that threatening children is a mistake he only makes once. The next day, Matthew received a call from a blocked number. When he answered, a woman's voice said, "This is Detective Marie Larkin, Metro Police. We need to talk about Longglass." They met at a coffee shop. Detective Larkin was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense. She had a file in front of her. "I've been investigating Glass for 2 years," she said. "Intimidation, extortion, assault. But he's slippery, and he has good lawyers. Your investigator, Stuart Barton, contacted me this morning. He said Glass threatened your daughter." "He did. I want to nail this guy, Dr. Barber. But I need evidence. A recording, a witness, something concrete." "What about the parking garage cameras?" "Already checked. He parked in a blind spot." "Convenient." Matthew thought for a moment. "What if I gave him another opportunity to threaten me? Somewhere you could monitor." Detective Larkin leaned forward. "What did you have in mind?" The plan was risky, but Matthew was past caring about safe. He called Blanca and offered to meet. Neutral ground, public place. A restaurant downtown at noon. Blanca agreed, probably thinking she could negotiate. She arrived with Longglass in tow, and Matthew knew Detective Larkin and 2 other plainclothes officers were watching from nearby tables. "Dr. Barber," Blanca said, her voice dripping false sweetness. "I'm so glad you agreed to meet. Perhaps we can settle this like civilized people." "There's nothing to settle," Matthew said. "The eviction stands." "That would be unwise." Lon leaned forward slightly. "I've done some research on you, Doctor. You have a very nice life. Nice house, nice car, healthy daughter. It would be a shame if something happened to disrupt that." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact. Things happen. Fires start. Cars have accidents. Children get lost." Detective Larkin chose that moment to approach the table, her badge visible. "Longglass, you're under arrest for criminal threatening and intimidation." Lon's face went pale. Blanca looked between them in confusion. "What is this?" "This," Matthew said, "is what happens when you hire criminals to do your dirty work." 2 officers appeared and handcuffed Lon. He was read his rights, still sputtering protests. Blanca stood, her face twisted with rage. "This is entrapment." "Actually," Detective Larkin said, "it's good police work. Mr. Glass here has a long history of making threats. Your association with him is going to make interesting reading in the newspapers tomorrow." Blanca turned on Matthew. "You think you've won? You've destroyed everything. My home, my reputation, my life." "No," Matthew said quietly. "You did that yourself. I just made sure you faced the consequences." The final eviction date arrived. Matthew didn't attend personally. He'd seen enough of Blanca Williamson to last a lifetime. Instead, he sent Kevin Franklin to oversee the process, with Stuart Barton there to document everything. The reports they brought back were grim. Blanca had left the mansion in shambles, destroying what she couldn't take. Walls were damaged, fixtures removed, spite evident in every room. "She trashed it," Kevin said, "out of pure vindictiveness. The repairs are going to cost a fortune." "I expected nothing less," Matthew said. "Can it be fixed?" "Eventually." "But Matt, what are you going to do with an $8 million mansion?" Matthew smiled. "I'm going to turn it into something Claire would have loved." Over the next 6 months, Matthew oversaw the transformation of the Williamson estate. He donated it to the Children's Hospital Foundation, with the stipulation that it be converted into a residential facility for families with children receiving long-term treatment. Parents could stay there, close to their sick kids, supported by staff and resources. They named it the Claire Barber House. The dedication ceremony was held on a sunny Saturday in May. Emma, now 9, stood beside her father as they cut the ribbon. Reporters were there, hospital officials, grateful families. The story had made the news. The surgeon who'd bought his mother-in-law's mansion and turned it into a sanctuary. "This is what my wife believed in," Matthew told the gathered crowd. "That wealth should serve kindness, not cruelty. That power should protect the vulnerable, not abuse them. I hope this house honors her memory." Later, as the ceremony wound down, Patricia Spaulding approached them. "You did it," she said. "Everything by the book, and you still won." "We won," Matthew corrected, putting his arm around Emma. "Together." "What happened to Blanca?" Emma asked. Patricia's expression was grim. "She's facing charges for hiring Longglass." He's already pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence, and his testimony implicated her. She'll likely do time. Good, Emma said simply. Matthew looked at his daughter, seeing not the frightened 6-year-old from that rainy night, but a strong, confident young woman in the making. How do you feel? I feel like justice isn't just punishment, Emma said thoughtfully. It's also making something good from something bad. Grandma Blanca tried to hurt us, but we turned her cruelty into something that helps people. Your mother would be proud of you, Matthew said softly. I hope so. I wish I remembered her better. Let me tell you about her, Matthew said. And as they walked through the gardens of what was once Blanca's mansion and was now a place of healing, he shared stories of Claire, her kindness, her strength, her unwavering belief that people deserved second chances. But Grandma Blanca didn't get a second chance, Emma pointed out. She had many chances, Matthew said. After what she did to you that night, I gave her 8 years to realize what she'd done, to apologize, to change. She chose cruelty instead. Some people don't want second chances, sweetheart. They want to win at any cost. And what do we want? Matthew looked at the mansion, at the families already moving in, at the hope in their eyes. We want to build something better. 6 months later, Blanca Williamson stood in a courtroom, awaiting sentencing. The charges were multiple: conspiracy to commit assault, criminal threatening, witness intimidation. Lon Glass had already been sentenced to 5 years. Blanca's expensive lawyers had managed to negotiate a plea deal, but she was still looking at 18 months in minimum security. Matthew attended the sentencing, not out of vindictiveness, but because he needed to see this chapter close. Emma stayed home. She'd said her goodbyes to that part of her life. Blanca looked small in her orange jumpsuit, nothing like the imperious woman who'd sneered at him from her mansion doorway. When she saw Matthew, her face twisted with hatred. This is your fault, she hissed as the bailiff led her past him. You destroyed me. No, Matthew said calmly. You destroyed yourself. I just refused to let you destroy my daughter. The judge sentenced her to 18 months, with credit for time served. Blanca would be out in a year with good behavior. Matthew didn't care. She'd lost everything that mattered to her: money, status, power. What she did with the rest of her life was her problem. As he left the courthouse, his phone rang. It was Emma, calling from home. Dad? How did it go? It's over, Matthew said. All of it. Can we go to the Claire Barber house this weekend? Mrs. Peterson invited us to visit. Her son just finished his cancer treatment, and she wanted to thank us. Of course, Matthew said, his heart swelling with pride. We'd be honored. That Saturday, they visited the Claire Barber house. Mrs. Peterson, a tired-looking woman with a resilient smile, greeted them with tears in her eyes. Her son, Tommy, was 7 and bald from chemotherapy, but grinning as he showed Emma his Lego collection. Dr. Barber, Mrs. Peterson said, gripping his hands. This place saved us. When Tommy was diagnosed, we didn't know how we'd manage. The hospital is an hour from our home. I couldn't afford to quit my job, but I couldn't leave him alone. And then we heard about this place. You don't have to thank me, Matthew said. My wife would have done the same thing if she'd been here. This is her dream, really. I just made it happen. She must have been an amazing woman. She was, Matthew said, watching Emma play with Tommy. And she left behind an amazing daughter. Later, as they drove home, Emma was quiet. Finally, she said, Dad, do you think Grandma Blanca will ever understand why she was wrong? I don't know, Matthew admitted. Some people never do. They're so invested in their own righteousness that they can't see the harm they cause. That's sad. It is. But Emma, we can't control what other people learn or don't learn. We can only control ourselves. And we chose to turn something terrible into something beautiful. I'm glad we did. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. 2 years passed. The Claire Barber house flourished, helping dozens of families. Matthew's career continued to thrive. The hospital had dismissed all of Blanca's complaints once the full story came out, and his reputation actually improved. He became known not just as an excellent surgeon, but as a man who stood up for what was right. Emma was 11 now, confident and kind. She volunteered at the Claire Barber house on weekends, reading to the younger children, much like her mother had done at the hospital all those years ago. Blanca had been released from prison after serving her full sentence. Matthew heard through Trevor Caldwell that she'd moved to Florida, living in a modest condo paid for by the remnants of her trust. She'd lost everything: her mansion, her social standing, her freedom. Trevor reported that she was bitter, angry, still blaming Matthew for her downfall. She hasn't learned anything, Trevor said over coffee one afternoon. They'd become unlikely friends over the years, bound by their shared history with the Williamsons. She still thinks she was the victim. That's her choice, Matthew said. I've moved on. Have you? Trevor asked. Because I know you, Matt. You spent 8 years planning revenge. That's a long time to carry that weight. Matthew considered the question. I don't regret what I did. But you're right, it was heavy. Carrying that plan, that anger, for so long. It changed me. For better or worse? Both, probably. I'm harder now. Less trusting. But I'm also more present for Emma. More aware of what really matters. Trevor raised his glass. To complicated legacies. To moving forward, Matthew countered. They drank. That evening, Matthew came home to find Emma in the study, looking at old photos of Claire. She did this sometimes, trying to connect with the mother she barely remembered. Tell me about her, Emma said. Not the big stories. The small things. Matthew sat beside her. She hummed when she cooked. Off-key, but she didn't care. She loved thunderstorms, said they made the world feel alive. She couldn't parallel park to save her life, but she'd never admit it. He smiled at the memories. She believed in people, sometimes too much. She thought everyone deserved kindness, even when they didn't earn it. Is that why she married you? Emma teased. Probably, Matthew laughed. I was a mess when we met. Arrogant, closed off. She saw something in me I didn't see in myself. She'd be proud of what you did, Emma said. With the house, I mean. Not the revenge part. She probably wouldn't like that. But the house. You're probably right, Matthew admitted. Your mother believed in redemption, in second chances. I believed in justice. Can't they be the same thing? Matthew looked at his daughter, wise beyond her years. Sometimes, when justice creates something better. But revenge without purpose is just cruelty. We had to make sure our actions built something, not just destroyed. Emma nodded, understanding in her eyes. The Claire Barber house is the proof that we did it right. No, Matthew said. You're the proof. You're strong and kind and brave. You didn't let what your grandmother did make you bitter. That's the real victory. Emma hugged him. I had a good teacher. On the 8th anniversary of the cardboard box incident, Matthew and Emma returned to Riverside Heights. Not to the Claire Barber house. That had its own life now, its own story. They went to the public park nearby, a place where Claire used to take Emma when she was a baby. They sat on a bench overlooking the pond. Emma was almost 13, poised on the edge of adolescence, no longer the little girl who'd shivered in a cardboard box. Do you remember that night? Matthew asked. Really remember it. I remember being cold, Emma said, and scared. I remember thinking Grandma must be right, that I was bad somehow. Then you came, and you told me to remember. Do you regret it? The years of planning, the revenge, all of it. Emma thought for a long moment. No. But Dad, can I tell you something? Always. I forgave Grandma Blanca. Not for her. For me. Carrying anger would have made me like her, and I don't want that. Matthew felt his throat tighten with emotion. When did you decide this? A while ago. I was reading about Mom, her volunteer work, her philosophy. She believed in forgiveness. Not forgetting, but forgiving. So I did. That's very mature of you. But Dad, Emma continued, forgiving her doesn't mean what you did was wrong. She needed consequences. People who hurt others need to face justice. But I don't need to hate her to know she was wrong. Matthew pulled his daughter close. How did you get so wise? Good genes, Emma said, making him laugh. And a dad who taught me that strength isn't about hurting people. It's about protecting them. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the ducks on the pond. Finally, Emma said, Are you ready to move on? Really move on? I think so, Matthew said. The plan consumed me for so long. But it's done now. Blanca faced justice. The house honors your mother. And you're thriving. What else is there? Living, Emma said simply. Just living. Building new things instead of fixing old things. You're right, Matthew said. He stood, offering his hand. Come on. Let's go home. As they walked back to the car, Emma said, Dad? Thank you. For what? For fighting for me. For showing me that I mattered. That night, in the cardboard box, I thought maybe Grandma was right. Maybe I deserved it. But you showed me different. You showed me I was worth protecting. Matthew stopped walking and knelt down so he was eye level with his daughter. Emma Barber, you listened to me. You have always been worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth everything. Don't ever forget that. I won't, Emma promised. Because I had you to remind me. They drove home as the sun set over Riverside Heights, leaving behind the mansion that had once symbolized power and privilege, but now stood as a testament to compassion and healing. The Claire Barber house's lights were coming on, welcoming another family in need. Matthew thought about the 8-year journey that had brought them here. The pain, the planning, the careful execution of justice. He'd foreclosed on more than a building. He'd foreclosed on cruelty, on entitled abuse of power, on the idea that wealth placed some people above consequences. But more importantly, he'd built something. A legacy for Claire. A safe place for his daughter to grow into a strong, kind woman. A home for families who needed hope. Blanca had smirked and said, "She's better off with the stray dogs." She'd been wrong about everything. Emma wasn't better off with dogs. She was better off with love, protection, and a father who would move heaven and earth to keep her safe. And in the end, that was the real victory. Not the foreclosure, not the legal battles, not even the prison sentence. The victory was Emma, confident and healthy and kind, ready to face the world. As they pulled into their driveway, Emma said, "Hey Dad, next weekend, can we go back to the Claire Barber house? Tommy's birthday is coming up, and I want to help Mrs. Peterson plan a party." "Of course," Matthew said, his heart full. "And Dad, I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. Always." They walked into their home together. Not a mansion, not a symbol of wealth and power, but a place filled with warmth and laughter and the kind of love that Blanca Williamson would never understand. Justice had been served. But more importantly, mercy had been learned, strength had been forged, and a little girl who'd once been left in a cardboard box had grown into a young woman who chose kindness over cruelty. That night, as Matthew tucked Emma into bed, a ritual she claimed she was too old for, but secretly still cherished, he thought about the question Trevor had asked. Had the revenge changed him for better or worse? The answer, he realized, was both. He'd become harder, yes, more calculating, but he'd also become more present, more aware of what mattered. He'd learned that justice wasn't just about punishment, it was about protection, about making sure the vulnerable were safe and the powerful were accountable. He'd also learned that true strength wasn't about dominance. It was about knowing when to fight and when to build, when to seek revenge and when to seek redemption. Blanca had taught him what cruelty looked like. Claire had taught him what love looked like. And Emma, beautiful, strong, forgiving Emma, was teaching him what wisdom looked like. As he turned out the light and closed Emma's door, Matthew whispered, "Thank you, Claire, for giving me her, for giving me purpose. I hope I made you proud." In the darkness of his own room, he finally let go of the anger he'd carried for 8 years. Blanca was in Florida, living with her consequences. The mansion was serving families in need. Emma was safe and thriving. The plan was complete. The revenge was done. Justice had been served. Now came the harder part, living with peace instead of purpose, with contentment instead of calculation. But as he drifted off to sleep, Matthew smiled. Because he had the best reason in the world to learn how to live again. He had Emma. And that made everything, the pain, the planning, the 8-year war, worth it. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.